showing up the latest Remnant fly today. This is just a very simple and basic topwater popper. I had somebody reach out to me recently and mention that they would like to see some videos on tying topwater poppers here in central Indiana, where I live in the Midwest. Warm water fisheries, topwater poppers like this are very, very popular and very productive. So this spring at some point I'm going to be doing a series on different poppers, different things that you can do. But in looking in my Remnant kit for what it was I'm going to do the latest fly on, I happened to run across this popper head and thought, it would be nice just to do a quick video on a very simple, basic popper. And that's all this is: marabou tail, some legs, hackle, and the popper head. Now there's some tips and tricks in terms of tying in the marabou and attaching the popper head, which I'll get into in the video. But that is the latest Remnant fly, just a basic topwater popper. I'll get started tying. Begin this Remnant fly with my hook and the vise. This is a Mustad 33903, which is a kink-shanked hook. This little popper that I'm going to do is going to be on this kink-shanked hook. You don't have to do them on kink-shanked hooks particularly, but a long time ago, when poppers were tied on straight-shanked hooks, it was found that a lot of times either the lacquer or the glue and thread that was on the hook shank would break away through use. And what you would end up with is the popper heads rotating around on the hook shank. So they developed kink-shanked hooks to try and physically stop that from happening, and they work pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. It's also what was in my kit. I've debarbed the hook. Before I attach my thread, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to place the popper head, the resulting popper head, on the hook shank right where I'm going to want it to be, where I'm going to want the end result to be. And the reason for this is I have found over the years that it is much easier to tie your poppers by tying in the tail, any flash or whatever, and hackle in the rear, and then attach the popper head afterward. I started out like everybody else, attaching these right onto the hook and then putting the stuff in the back. It all gets in the way. So I'm going to do that because then I can take my thread. I'm using a 140 Denier in Chartreuse, Wapsi UTC 140 Denier, and I'm going to attach that thread right behind the body. And this is a marker for me, because what that means is when I take this off, while I'm tying in the rear tail materials, I don't want to go into that space. That's going to be where the body's at. Generally, your poppers don't have a whole lot in the rear. They may have a tail, they may have some flash or rubber legs and a hackle, but really there's just not a whole lot to them. So with my thread attached, now I'm going to put in the tail. I'm going to use some Chartreuse Marabou for this. However, if you're doing Chartreuse and tails, and a lot of times what people will do is they'll take that feather and they'll stroke it all out, and then they're going to take just these nice tips and everything for the tail. Well, look at all of this that kind of gets wasted. If you have a nice full feather like this, what you can do is actually just peel off a bunch of the fluff from the side, just like this. Now we can clump that together. And if you want, you can break away some of these fine tips with your thumbnail. So you end up with a nice clump of marabou fluff for a tail. serves the same purpose. Now I've got all of this to use, this and even the tips there. Again, this is a simple little popper. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Matter of fact, since I am not, I'm going to tie this about the length of the hook, maybe a little bit longer, since I am not dressing up the head, or I should say the actual popper on this, then it makes it even more simpler. Notice my thread, I'm trying to keep it back from behind, or I should say back from the body area where it's going to go into that actual body. And if it does a little bit, we can fudge around that. That's not a problem. All right, so there's our tail. Now you can put some flash in if you want. I'm just going to put in some rubber legs. I've got these barred Chartreuse and black barred Sili legs. I'm going to put in a couple of them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 full lengths here. I'm going to tie these in on my side here, long. I'm going to work forward, not getting into the hook shank where the popper head's going to go. Work back down to where I tied that in. Now I can fold these back over to the other side and bind them in on the other side. Cover all of that up. Smooth that off just a little bit. Then I can trim these legs, and I'm going to trim the legs a little bit longer than the actual tail. So those will have lots of action out in the water. Now, for a little collar on this, which a lot of your poppers do have collars, I'm going to use this little remnant piece of orange Schlappen. Going to tie this in by the tip. Trim away some of the excess there. This is where, if we do actually come forward, I'm just right at the edge of that space. I'll probably anchor that in a little forward, but I'll show you that'll work. Grabbing my hackle pliers, this makes it a little bit easier, especially when working around the bobbin. I'm just going to fill that space up with this hackle. You could certainly tie in a couple of hackles if you want, some rabbit if you want as a collar, pretty much anything you want in the back as a collar here. I'm just going to fill that space up with this hackle. Hackle ends up, I think, just kind of looking like legs as well. Actually, I'm going to unwind this for a second, and I'll explain. As soon as I get up to the front, this hackle is going to want to pop down off this little ledge I've got. You really can't, at this point, put in like a thread dam or a taper there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put just a half a drop of CA glue. This is a Gorilla super glue slash Zap-A-Gap is another popular one. What that's going to do for me is it's going to help to fix that rachis right to those thread wraps, and it's going to be less likely to pop down and cause a problem. Careful stroking all that back. You can get some CA glue on your fingers. I'm going to try and fold those hackle fibers back before you actually get down on there. There we go. There. Let that set for just a second there. Now when I come around here, I can get a wrap in right there, and I can tie this in. Now I have gone into that space where the body's going to be, but that's all right. We can use that to our advantage. Stroking this back, I'm going to just smooth this off just a little bit. That is going to complete the tail end of our fly. I'm going to come forward just a little bit, not quite up to the eye, and I'm going to come backward again and then back forward. And this is going to, when I go back forward this last time, it's more of an open spiral. This is going to give me a good thread base to glue that popper head to. 3 or 4 turn whip finish. The thread is done. So now I got my thread base on here. A couple of things we can do. We can go ahead and glue the popper head right on, or I like to do a little bit of a test fit just to make certain. That way I know exactly where I'm going to position it and how it's going to go on once I put the super glue on there. This is just a closed cell foam pre-made popper head, and it has a slit on the bottom of it. If you pinch it together on the other side, it'll open that slit up. So you can pinch that and just place that right on top. Now notice those hackle fibers right up here, they're not quite that far forward, but if you put this in such a way as you go down on it and then push backwards, see how you can snug right up on that? Now I have a little bit more space right up here behind the eye than I like, so I'll probably pull that just forward just a little bit right about there. I also like to have the belly, the bottom right here on this particular hook. It's not a wide gap, so I'm going to actually have that up just a little bit so that I can squeeze this together and get that foam glued around on the bottom side, but I don't have it really deep in there like this, because this will get in the way of the hooks, this will get in the way of the gap of the hook and the point of the hook, so interfering with hook sets. So you'll want to keep that just on there enough so we can squeeze this together. So that's how I'm going to do that. You don't want to slather this on. You want to just put enough to coat it. Matter of fact, I got a little excess there. I will take my bodkin, wipe some of that off, and spread that around. This will not really set up just sitting on here, on these threads like this for a long time. So you have lots of time to work with that. Now, I find it's often easiest to come at this from the underside. Turning my hook over, I'll actually bring this up under, just like this. Get that in the position that I want. And then I'm going to pinch this together so that I squeeze that bottom. I'm squeezing some of that glue out, and I'm getting that foam around the hook, I should say around the bottom side of the hook, hoping that you can see that well enough. Yeah, and see, once I get that pinched together like that, that will set up. I don't want to pinch so far that I roll my fingers together, because then I'm going to get glue all over my fingers. I just want to get that foam glued up and set up on the underside just like that. And that will continue to set up in there, and it'll be just fine. Could have angled that down just a little bit more, but I'm happy with this being glued together on the underside. and this will certainly pop well enough. Final step, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can color these heads. You can get some markers out and color them if you want. You can use some of the Copic markers in their spray system. You can just use regular Sharpies if you want, or not do anything if you want to. You can also glue on some stick-on eyes to the sides, put a little bit of head cement or clear cure goo on there to help protect it a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and just put a couple of black dots on here with the Sharpie, like this. This is going to be, I think, more for you than anything else. And there you have it. Something to consider, and as I said, I will do a series on doing poppers here this spring sometime. But one thing to consider is how much time you put into tying one of these flies. You take these pre-made foam heads, or even ones you cut and make yourself. Very quickly, you can put the backside here, glue this in, and it's done. If needed, I mean, if you want to, you can paint it, you can color it, you can make it all kinds of beautiful with a protective epoxy coating and everything else. It's going to add time to the overall time of tying that fly. You're never going to make these 100% bomb-proof. They will get banged up, they will get knocked up, they'll get scratched, they'll get chewed up, and everything else. Unless you're going to frame it, or put it on display, I should say, then that's one thing. But if you're going to be fishing these, for me, for the most part, I would rather, if I'm just going to go out for an afternoon or evening and I need a half a dozen of these poppers, I'm going to tie them up like this and just leave it. It's good to go. I might use on this particular one a chartreuse head or a yellow head instead of the white. That's what I had. But I'm not going to take the extra 5, 10, 15 minutes to dress the head up and everything, simply because in that time frame, I can have another 4, 5, 6, 8 tied up. If I lose it on a tree, if a fish tears the head off of it, if I lose it on a rock or something like this, I got another one. I just replace it. So something to consider. That is a very, very basic topwater popper. This would be good for some bluegill and smallmouth. And that is the latest Remnant fly. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. What's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.